this computer.
Let me get that on my end, and looks like we're good to go.
All right. So, welcome, Toriea, to Earth School Podcast. I am so excited to have you here. And Toriea and I were just already chatting, and I was just like, I need to press record because I just know that every single sentence is going to be so valuable. So, I am going to read your bio. So, Toriea, a hermeticist, activating ancient knowledge and living hermetic prophecy. Step into the enigmatic world of self-activated healing with Toriea, a devoted hermeticist who not only unravels the mysteries of ancient knowledge, she also embodies the essence of hermetic prophecy in her own life. As a vessel of hermetic wisdom, Toriea is on a mission to activate profound insights and guide seekers on a path of spiritual awakening. Dive into the sacred teachings of hermetics written into the cells of our very beings with Toriea, a true alchemist of wisdom, unlocking the esoteric secrets that hold the keys to personal transformation, spiritual growth, and a deeper understanding of the universe. Such a Dharma reveals itself in Toriea's life through her magnitude of lived experiences in surviving to thriving and dying to living. She showcases the power of alignment with universal truths, psychic change, and the interconnectedness of all things. Connect more with Toriea on her website at hermeticallyspeaking.com and on socials at Hermetically Speaking, and embark on a profound exploration of the inner hermetic wisdom within you, where ancient knowledge and living prophecy converge in the tapestry of one's own existence. That's so beautiful. Like, what beautiful writing. I love all the words. Are you a writer too?
I definitely am, but I will have to claim Chat GPT helped me tweak some of that because I was so, I don't know if it was nerves. I don't know if it's just in
Uh-huh.
this dying part of the season where everything feels so scattered. And so
Yeah.
like I would get stuck on certain parts, but then, and so I was able to frame it together and take little
Well,
pieces.
you and ChatGPT make a good team. I feel
Yes.
like I'd read a book like based on that. It just felt good. It felt kind of magical just to say those words. Very cool.
It's a little bit of a healing tincture going on because I was so resistant to AI and not using it. And so I kind of
Yeah.
surrendered and been like, okay, I am not going to be, yeah. So it's a healing modality. So I'm glad that that speaks through
It
to it.
came through. And that is like perfectly, this podcast. The idea is to share stories of people who have actually found ways to shift out of feeling like they're a victim to all that is experienced on this planet into feeling like they have skills to actually like live according to their values no matter what's happening around them, and not have to just feel stuck and trapped by victimhood. And it's just beautiful how, I heard your story, like I said, on Karen Rontowski's podcast. What's it called? Paranormal Karen.
Yes.
Go listen to that episode. Maybe I can figure out how to link it in the description. And you talk about your personal journey, but it's just that it's this taking these healing opportunities to say, okay, where am I feeling stuck or trapped? And how can I like begin to release into choices?
Yeah.
So beautifully done just in like explaining your resistance to writing a bio. It's the perfect metaphor for what you've been doing. So I'd love to hear what you feel willing to share, just to sort of, I'd love to hear most of all, like what was the kickoff for you where you were like, oh, maybe I am not only a victim, like maybe I have choices.
Oh gosh, that's a strong question. I think it started whenever I was probably around 12, and I decided that I wanted to be what I always needed, yet never had. Of course, though, at that age, I was powerless over a lot of things. The adults in my life, not that I would change them for anything, it's just the living situations, the experiences going on. And eventually, the pain and suffering got so great that there was this pivotal moment when I was trying to get clean. And I would bounce back and forth. I would get myself clean and I would have a few days clean. And then I'd be like, oh, I can just do one more. And then one more always turns into, one is too many and 1,000 is never enough. And so I remember living in my mom's house, just the bottom of the bottom, not having my own bedroom, sleeping in a twin size bed, being a grown woman, well, physically, not mentally and emotionally. And I just remember this like deep surrender where it's like in my mind, I didn't even know what I was doing. Um, and then there were a lot of things that happened after that. There was the psychosis started setting in, the voices started setting in, the premonitions, the visions. And I think it was just a long time coming. And it was just, when was I willing to give up myself? And
Mhm.
in that moment, I was willing to give up myself. I was so tired of being myself. I was so tired of being who I was and not understand, like only understanding pain. And I wanted to
Mhm.
understand something more. And
Mhm.
that moment, you know, I didn't know what I was creating from that moment at that time, egoically. But it became the most monumental shift. And it was right before, it was in the transition period before my Saturn return.
Ah, so you started with something was happening when you were 12, and then what, like, fill us in a little bit, like, why is the starting point 12 and then the surrenders, like, maybe 29, is that right?
28, yes.
28, okay.
Yes. Yeah, sure, of course. So 12, my dad passed away when I was 10. And
Mm.
I have this thing. So I have three parents. I was raised in three different places. I have three siblings. My whole life revolves around the world, the number three, and I know a lot of people's does. Uh,
Mhm.
and so my dad and I were very enmeshed growing up. And of course, when I use these terminologies, this is after the fact of awareness, not during those time periods.
Yeah.
I was not that great when I was that age. But I did have this keenness to me where I had this gift that I could see why people's motives were the way that they were, especially when it had to do
Mm.
with trauma. And it was probably due to the type of trauma that I sustained earlier in years and my mom's behavior of codependency and her survival modes. And
Mhm.
so my dad passed away, and there was a lot of trauma around it. Um, we were best friends, but he hid from me that he was sick and was going to die for months
Mm.
and didn't allow anyone to tell me. So when it did
Mhm.
happen, it was like this whole, like literally my whole universe changed. I went from
Oh.
having three loving parents, three loving families, three loving siblings, sports, school, straight A's, everything, to the day that my dad died. It was like this cosmic interception, and like I went into a whole different universe. It
Mm.
broke everything in my life. My dad's
Mhm.
family, who I was extremely close with, stole everything that he left me and turned their backs on me and traumatized me in the meantime by calling and telling me everything that they were doing, like
Right.
that the other was doing. So one aunt would
Mhm.
call me and tell me what this uncle was doing, and I
Mhm.
couldn't do anything about it.
Yeah, you're
Um,
a kid.
and then my mom ended up taking something for herself as well. And that broke that last ideal that I had of like my
Yeah.
parents being superheroes was shattered in that moment. And so my mom and I became extremely toxic for each other. I was visited by Hermes that evening, and Hermes gave me the idea that if I started stealing and showed all of the adults in my life what kind of example they were setting for me, they would have, it would be obvious. They would have to be like, we have to stop what we're doing because we're teaching Marie to do all these things. And that's my family name.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, so
S
everything just kind of
so
barreled down. Hermes.
Hermes came to
Yes.
you. This is Hermes Trismegistus, who is the basis of Hermeticism?
Yes, he is. But also at this time, it was Hermes mythological style. So,
Okay.
so yes, like the flutters on the feet,
Yeah.
the trickster aspect of him. Um,
Okay. And did
yes.
you know at that time, like, this is Hermes?
I did not actually. I had no clue. I didn't find out until just a few years ago.
Okay.
But I did constantly have dreams of myself flying around and the ways
Huh.
to fly and, you know, being able to go between realms and all of these things. And so it was like I embodied Hermes whenever I was sleeping, and then
Mhm.
would, you know, and then wake up, and everything was extremely real. I would wake up and think that I could actually fly, even
Yeah.
remembering, I'm like, I know I flew when I was a kid.
Uh-huh.
You know, and
And so
so what
you would
happened?
get those thoughts that came in, and now that you understand what was happening, it was an offering from Hermes.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I was very
Fascinating.
I received I understand telepathy a lot better now. I use telepathy on a daily basis, and I know a lot of the ins and outs of it. I was taught a lot of it in psychosis and how it works and a lot of other things. And during this time period, my mom and I, we just fell apart. My mom and my stepdad, that I known as my second dad all my life, fell apart toxically, and abusively. And so everything just one year after another. And I remember making this commitment to myself after what happened with my mom, which was it was me, myself, and I. And I would
Mhm.
get messages all along the way. It was, you're not grieving properly. And I'd be like, I know,
Mm.
but what am I going to do about it? You know what I mean? And
Mm.
very, very mature responses. I remember like 18 years old, my prophecy being read to me in my head saying, you have to leave your house. You have to leave your house and let
Mhm.
your mom raise your siblings because the nature of you and your mom and the nature that you're in is so toxic at this point in time that it's hurting them. And the prophecy was
Mhm.
100% right.
Mhm.
And of course, I repeated patterns. I sought out people that would steal from me. I sought out people that
Mhm.
would abuse me, and I got myself in a heinous situation. I will like to disclaim here, I like to leave everybody better than I found them.
Mhm.
So there are certain things, but I don't like to go into detail about the traumas
100%.
just so that way uh,
Yeah.
people don't get triggered. I
Yeah.
have been there. I
100%.
think, you know, any conversation sometimes can trigger anybody. And so
Yeah.
I do my
Thank you
best.
for that. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it led me to when I was 17, I met somebody after I got out of the group home. And we didn't really hit it off. It was more or less like his best friend cousin was dating my best friend, and so it was
Mm.
like one of those
Mhm.
things.
Mhm.
And so, early on, he cheated and I broke up with him, and then the day I turned 18, I took him back because my mom and I got into a big fight and I wanted somewhere else to go.
Yeah.
And then 2 months later, he, sexually assaulted me in a very heinous way. And
Mhm.
then 2 months I left immediately after he did that, and then 2 months afterwards, I went against my better judgment, and I allowed him to apologize to me in person because he was
Mhm.
threatening suicide. And I
Mhm.
had been very familiar with what it was like to try to kill yourself. That
Mhm.
is something I have a lot of experience with when I was a teenager, and
Mhm.
but I put myself on his yoga mat, and it put me in a really, really bad spot
Yeah.
to where he was able to hold me hostage with a firearm
Mhm.
and make me agree to stay with him and forgive
Mhm.
him, or he was going to go and harm my siblings and my family.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so 10 years of my life I spent in Stockholm syndrome,
Mhm.
because I remember waking up the next morning after he held me at gunpoint, and I remember, again, telepathy, the message they're always there was,
Mhm.
"What are you gonna do?" And I was like, "What do you mean what I'm gonna do?" Like,
Yeah.
I
This
remember
is
it
my life
very
now.
yeah,
Yeah.
like this, like, what do you mean? I don't have anybody to go to.
Yeah.
I can't go to my mom. Like, I don't trust her. We're
Yeah.
toxic. What do you mean? And the next question was, "Are you gonna choose love or hate?"
Yeah.
And I said, what do you mean? Again, what do you mean? I'm going to choose
Mhm.
love. I'm going to choose everything that I always wanted and never
Mhm.
had or never felt
Mhm.
like I had.
Mhm.
And that was the moment that my mind was like, okay, we're going to enter Stockholm syndrome and
Yeah.
we're going to protect you and we're going to protect your body. We had
Yeah.
conversations about me having a child, and I said, nope, never going to happen. And
Mhm.
I called in endometriosis and polycystic ovarian syndrome
Mhm.
into my body. Um, I didn't know that I was doing these things, obviously.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
it wasn't until after the Saturn return and after the psychosis that I healed my body from endometriosis and polycystic ovarian syndrome and was given back the gift of being able to carry a child.
Mhm.
And, that was a lot, and that was thanks to, Lacey Free. I had a reading with her, and
Mhm.
she directed me to goddess Ixchel, which is a Mayan goddess, and goddess
Mhm.
Ixchel walked me down this road of I had a surgery, and, I shouted it from the rooftops for probably 3 weeks that I could have a child because
Mhm.
you know, I gave it up to
Mhm.
protect myself and to
Right.
protect whoever would have been, and he did everything he could to hold to stay attached to me. He wanted to
Right.
get me pregnant, he wanted me to
Right.
do IVF and, things like that, but I lived, all of those years in a very self-destructive hell based on my patterning from my earlier years
Right.
and from my generational trauma. A
Mhm.
lot of it was that. So 2027 rolled around and
Can I ask you
yeah,
one thing before
absolutely.
you yeah, thank you so much for sharing all this, by the way. What I'm really noticing is how you're adding in to your telling of the past story, like the wisdom that you can now see was coming through in it. And that is a skill that a lot of people haven't been taught, right? How to actually change the history by bringing in the wisdom that was, the way that the greater wisdom was guiding and protecting through that whole and using all those challenges, like to actually bring you into, like you used the word prophecy, or into the growth or understanding that you were meant to be offered through it all. And I'm curious, like, was Hermeticism, like, did that teach you that skill to be able to look back and say, oh, when I was getting those nudges, or when I was telling my body, hey, I don't want to have a baby subconsciously, that was how I was being supported by this other force outside of myself? How did you connect in with that?
Uh, it was a lot, some of the psychosis, but it was also doing the work of removing my victimhood. It really
Yeah.
was because as I removed my victimhood, my entire story changed. I
Right.
went from my family stole everything and abandoned me, and I was an orphan, and you know what I mean? And what else? And I was raped and sodomized and beaten and, all of these things. And then it changed to I was a drug addict and I stole, and whether Hermes visited me or not, and people don't understand that concept, but I still knew it was wrong to steal. And I stole from my family even after what I was trying to teach them didn't work. And I became a drug addict and I became a thief and I became this person that was just so buried in my pain. And even in the beginning of the psychosis, like I was addressing myself, like they were helping me. Like it was funny because I made that commitment at 12 to be me, myself, and I. It might have been
Mhm.
between 12 and 14 is when all the major shifts happened.
Mhm.
Um, and so then I remember like when the psychosis first started setting in and I was completely by myself, when the universe had basically was like, we're going to put you by yourself and you can't have contact with anybody. Uh, they brought up me, myself, and I again. They were like, kept saying to me,
Mm.
me, myself, and I, me, myself, and I. And so it was like full circle. And they were teaching me, or not, they were helping me. They were also very destructive in my mentality. Like I was going crazy. There's no doubt about it. And what I would, I just accepted that I loved somebody that did all those awful things to me. I was like, I don't know how to explain that I loved somebody that did these things to me. Yet I didn't remember the things that he had done. I just remembered that he was awful to me. I remembered like so I shouldn't say I didn't remember. I remember a lot of the things that he did, but the most extreme things. So the initial, the gunpoint, and a few other things I never remembered until the memories came back.
Right.
And then the voices also came through and they were just like, you were in Stockholm syndrome. And I was like, oh shit. Like, you mean like these aha moments through telepathy were just like coming
Mhm.
in. Um, and what helped me through it is the fact that as I was told that, I went through a 2-year period of where I had to repatternize my brain that I didn't really love him, that it was a whole
Yeah.
different concept. Like I loved him and I experienced real love because it's what
Mhm.
kept me protected,
Right.
but I didn't have a choice to fall in love with him.
Right.
It wasn't an organic, authentic, you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
It was a
Um,
survival response.
exactly. And so that took a long time to separate from, as well as I'm not responsible for what he did to me. I
Mhm.
am, however, responsible for the fact that I did these actions that led me, you know what I mean? I wanted to be with him just so I could get away from my mom. Like I
Mhm.
was using him,
Right.
and I was manipulating
It
him.
wasn't just a one-way street. There
It
he was
was
doing
not.
things that were not in integrity, and so were you. So some of
It,
that realization allowed you to not just be like, okay, he is clearly the persecutor and I am clearly the victim. You were able to take a little self-responsibility, and that helped to start to shift it.
absolutely. I think that accountability and the self-responsibility, as you put it, is the most prominent thing to escaping victimhood. Just, I can give you a
Okay.
quick
Yeah,
example if
talk
you
more
like.
about that.
Um,
Self-responsibility is one of the primary ways to escape victimhood. Yeah.
Today even I had an issue with my family. My stepson reached out to me and he told me a story.
Mhm.
And when my stepson and my stepdaughter both know that, and my stepdaughter's older, and so she's already grown basically. So we've already been through this phase. And I have, I was that teenager that didn't have anything that I needed. No emotional, I had all, like, financially, I had clothes on my back and food in my belly. Emotionally, mentally, spiritually, like none of it was there. And so my stepson reached out to me and he gave me a story. And mind you, all of the adults in his life are recovering or in some form of alcoholism or addiction.
Okay.
And me and his dad are both recovered, but there are other adults that might not quite be as
Sure.
recovered. And so he was struggling with one of those, and he gave me a story, and it really triggered me because all I could think about
Mm,
was how heartbreaking it was to not have what he needed. You know what I mean? To have an
yeah.
adult in
Yeah.
his life that was making him feel this way, and it
Yeah.
was someone that he was supposed to trust and love, and and that loves him. And so I ended up reaching out to his sister, and his sister's a little bit more like, she's learned a lot from me with my awakening journey, that she like gives it right back to me, which is really, really nice. Surrounding yourself with people that will hold you accountable and not take your
Mm-hmm.
bullshit is one of the
Mm-hmm.
biggest factors. Like, I don't have friends that co-sign my bullshit. I have friends that are like,
Yes.
absolutely not. Like, I have friends that will tell me the tough things, and that's not very many of them either. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so my stepdaughter, she kind of put it in like the, well, you have to remember he's 15 and you're probably not getting all the story. And I didn't
Yes.
like what she said.
Yeah.
Absolutely did not like what she said. Here is my about to be 23-year-old stepdaughter telling me what's up. Like, absolutely not. And,
Yeah.
but it didn't
In
matter.
that moment.
Well, that's what's like, you know what I mean? I'm
Yeah.
feeling that. But at the same time, I love her so much. Like,
You're
I
so
don't respond that
grateful.
way. Yeah, I don't respond that way to anybody anymore. And even in with the love that I have for her, like, it's easier for me to be like, I think that that's what really holds it is, so my sponsor is like that as well. She took the time to build trust with me to where she is a trusted confidant. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm no longer switching friends all the time. That was one of
Yes.
the things that I could recognize myself for, was I had a different best friend every year.
Yeah.
Or even every other month. You know what I mean? Like, I was
Yeah.
always, now it's like, okay, I have these set people that are long term and, part of this internal and external family dynamic that I have. And my stepdaughter, even though I didn't want to hear it, I heard it because I
Yeah.
allow myself to make sure that I look at every angle. If somebody gives me
Mm.
an angle, I have to step into that role, like physically step into that role in my body and say, I am only looking at this from my stepson's point of view. What
Yep.
does that look like? And what does that feel like?
Yes.
And I'm like,
Yes.
and as soon as I did it, I'm like, I did. I
Oh.
always used to say it's like putting on a sweater. Or whenever I was in psychosis, they always showed me opening a door. And if when I
Mm.
opened the door, it was just a black abyss, it means it's not my shit. It's not me. But if I
Ah.
walked through the door, and I even had the opportunity to walk through the door and come back through saying, I changed my mind, but I visited that pathway and I'm allowed to visit that pathway. And I think
Yes.
that's something, like,
Oh,
we're
that
so ashamed of our
choice.
thoughts. Um, Another quick example I can give is I had a sponsee, and this is an example that I hold on to so dearly. I had a sponsee, and she's an amazing person, and she is an amazing mother now. Yet when she was in active addiction, she used when she was pregnant,
Right.
and the baby was born with complications. And when the
Yep.
baby was born, she went to rehab. Yet one of the questions when I was working dialect with her, because like I said, I use telepathy on a regular basis,
Hmm.
um, one of the dialects I picked up in her head was that, one of the thoughts I picked up was that if her baby died, then she had a reason to go out and use again. And
Right.
I had to straightforward ask her, like, do you want your baby to die so you can go use?
Yeah.
And she had to open that door. And she literally sat there with me on the phone and
And
said,
see.
I don't know. Like, yeah, I
Yeah.
don't know. And then she opened that door and she stepped through it and she saw what life would be like that. And she said, absolutely fucking not.
Yeah,
And
that's beautiful.
the whole direction changed of where her recovery went
Yeah,
after
because she
because
got to actually know for herself if
yeah,
that's what she needed to learn through that or if she could do it without it. That's so powerful.
she had to face herself. Like that's what
Yeah.
opening that door is it's facing yourself. It's, you know, the shame and the blame and everything else. We want to direct it outside of us, but we have to start looking and say like I'm the one that thinks like this. I'm the one that thinks judgmentally. So why
Mm-hmm.
like what am I judging myself about? Why am I
Mm-hmm.
if I'm judging this person about this, then I'm judging myself about this. And that
Yeah.
means I'm playing a victim. I'm in victimhood sometime somehow.
Yeah. So right there, do you mean other judgment implies self-judgment?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there is a point outside of victimhood because you know, there's a paradox to everything. There is a
Mm-hmm.
point outside of victimhood that now I can look at somebody and I can say, okay, that person is in judgment. You know what I mean? And I know that they're, you know, I know that, you know, that they haven't worked through this yet.
Yes.
And it's not a mirror back to me, but I can recognize it because it was once me. And I can say, okay,
Right.
yep, I remember working through that. And then I can move past it. I don't have to
Mm-hmm.
claim it as my own again.
And you
For a
don't have to
long
get all
time,
entangled with it.
and for
Yeah.
a long time, I thought I had to get back entangled with it
Yeah.
because it was part of me. And I kind of was like, oh my gosh, is that me again? You know, you start to
Yeah.
question and then you're like, wait a minute, I don't live that way
Yeah.
anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And every layer is can be difficult and hard. There's so many layers. It's that onion. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It really is. And they're so microscopic, macrocosms to the microcosm. And
Yeah.
you can see them when they're right in front of you and working through them. And I'm sure you know, and all the listeners know, like how many layers they're already been
Right.
working through, and that
That
there's
was
still more to
something I
come.
really wanted to ask you about because, I've been on this journey like you for a couple decades and I am in another situation right now and it was like, whoa, for a week solid, maybe even 10 days, I was right back in victimhood. And it was like a rip current and it sucked me right back in. And there was some huge grief that came up in response because I felt like, "Oh my gosh, like, this is seriously my life mission is to talk about how we can release from victimhood," and here I am, like, right back in the wave of it, just feeling so pulled under, and then the grief came up, and then the self-criticism came up about feeling like, "How dare I talk to other people about this, and I can't even consistently do it," and then I'm emerging I'm emerging in the past 24 hours really, because I finally was able to go, "Oh, this is just another layer that, like, I couldn't have like, I needed to have this as another opportunity to learn it on this level, which is a different level of understanding than I would have had the capacity to in the past, and it was a shorter stint, 8 years ago when I went through something similar, it took me about 3 years to come out of it, and this time it was 10 days. So I'm like, "I think I'm making progress, not perfection," right? But yeah, like for that like grief and that like self-criticism that comes up when you have another wave of it, like how do you support yourself with that?
So, I will get to that in one second. There's one thing
Okay.
I want to say about victimhood and sharing when somebody has done something to you. Um, because I know that like we're all like we're in this space of accountability and things like that. What I have found to be easiest for me is if I can go like say, you know, I can go to my sponsor, I can go to you. If my sponsor or whoever I'm going to, if they know the person personally that I'm
Mhm.
having this interaction with, or even if they don't, actually,
Mhm.
I should say even if they don't. I've been back and forth with this only because I've been seeing how it feels and what feels good in my system.
Mhm.
And I have come to the complete calculation that it feels better that I never mention the person's name. I
Yeah.
keep it autonomous because when I'm talking about somebody else, even if I feel I'm in the right and even if other people will agree with
Yeah.
me, and I do still have to share things to process things.
Right.
I'm allowed to say, "Hey, I'm really hurting right now and I need to run this by somebody. Somebody did this to me and, made me feel like this." And, I'm allowed to do that. What takes some of the victimhood away from me is what cancels some of it out is the fact that I leave the other person in the situation completely autonomous. I don't bring up
You
their
keep it
name. I don't
clean,
give
right?
indications who they are. And that takes away from my ego wanting to be proven right.
Well, that was the part that was the most uncomfortable this past week, is that I was like, and that's what I woke up to yesterday. I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm trying to prove that I'm right and he is wrong and get other people to agree with me." It's that seeking of justice and getting to the proof that someone else has done me wrong that has been so disastrous for me in the past. And I found myself there again. And it reminds me when you were talking about it, like, okay, I'm not gonna lie and say nothing's going on for me, but this like naming and wanting other people to be like, "Oh yeah, you're poor you. They're wrong and they did something wrong to you." It made me think of the like let there be no gossip or criticism, that they say at the end of a 12-step
Yeah.
meeting, which when I first started 12-step groups, I was like, "Wait, no gossip or criticism, what else would we talk about?" Because that was the only form of communication I had
We're
before
all
that.
sick. Well, and I love that you bring that up too, about your experience with that being so recent, because I have found that I was talking to somebody last year and they knew who I was talking about.
Yes,
Like it was process of elimination in their own mind.
sure.
It wasn't hard for them. And when I allowed them to bring that person's name in, or when I confirmed that it was that
Mm,
person, it
mm.
took away the anonymity and my ego came right back in. So
Yeah,
what I learned is that I have to be like, that's great if you think that you know it. I don't want to talk about who that person is individually. I just want to
yeah.
talk about the experience. Because that's what it's
There
truly
you
about,
go.
is the experience and the
I wanna talk
emotions that
about
you
the
felt in the experience.
experience.
It's not about who did it to you. It's not
Yeah,
about how they did it to you. It's not about why they did it to you.
yeah,
It happened to you and how did it affect you?
yeah. Let me get another piece of paper because we have used this one up, Toria. My gosh, so good. Okay. Since I wanna talk about the experience, not the who or the what.
Yeah. Because I mean, that's what we attach ourselves to. That person did this to me because of
Mhm.
this and how they did it. And it's
How
like,
dare they? Yeah,
Exactly, and it's more or less like, "Wait a minute, how did it feel in my body? How did it feel in my
that's
mind?
it.
Because all of those are different layers that I have to release this from.
Yes,
And
and
it's
totally under your control. How
yes,
did it feel in my body? How did it feel in my mind? What actions am I going to take as a result? That's all 100% under your control, which
exactly.
oh, this person, and oh, won't you hate them with me? And oh, won't
Yes,
you fight
yeah.
them with me? That's the totally out of our control part.
Exactly. Where did it make me discontent and irritable? Where did it stir my dis-ease? Where is
Yeah.
my dis-ease pointing? For me, recently, I have been I work a couple of programs and
Mhm.
my newest one is about food and I finally am in a good place with that. I
Mhm.
realized that I eat out of anger. Like it's like
Mhm.
like I'm angry at myself, angry at God, angry at my higher power, whatever you want to call it. I use God,
Mhm.
source, everything interchangeably.
Mhm.
And whatever it is, like that was my go-to. And I had to really like recently sit with why do I want to eat right now? Like it's not my
Mhm.
eating times. Like I've already eaten. I don't do what we call recreational eating anymore or
Mhm.
grazing. Um,
Mhm.
so I know that when I'm thinking about doing those things or wanting to do those things, I have to sit with myself and be like, what am I feeling right now?
What is
Because
this
those are
telling
the
me?
buried things, the things that I didn't address 20 years ago that are coming up.
And it has nothing to do with today and that I want some chips. It's
Exactly.
100% about something that's unresolved, and it just happens the message is coming through that desire for the chips. But it
Yes.
could be coming through chronic migraines, or it could be coming through any 100 million things.
Any form of disease. And it could also be triggered too. If you just had an experience
Sure.
like I did with my stepson the other night, which put me in a situation that stirred up some PTSD,
Yep.
like that of course, the past 24 hours, I looked at the brownie, you know what I mean? And the
Yeah.
brownie looked at me wrong. And I was just like, absolutely not, because right now sugar is
Yeah.
not in my vocabulary. Um,
So it's
and
any of those are pointing to something that's unresolved
yes,
rather than the present day. Yeah. So
yeah.
when you talk about like going, what is it telling me or where is it pointing me? Do you have a ritual or a process that you use when you ask that question, where is this pointing me?
Uh, I honestly like I've always given the testament to it being the 12 steps. I did so in my first 2 years of recovery, I did 4 rounds of steps back to back, like
Wait, 2
each like
years?
yeah. In my
Oh
first 2
my
years,
gosh,
I
it took me
did
5 years to do it once.
well, I did 4 rounds back to back in 6-month increments, and then I did my 5th round that I didn't quite complete and then picked back up, and then now it's honestly like 'cause like I said, so many layers.
Yeah.
The
It's
first
it's the
round
rest of your life, right? You're not supposed to finish.
well, that and it's just so many layers of trauma, you know what I mean? The parent fellowship that we all know and love that was the creator of the 12 steps was the I did my steps in that first because I couldn't handle the NA workbook because it talked
Right.
about sexual trauma and abuse, and I couldn't go
The
there.
things that you were trying to avoid, yeah.
Exactly, and so I did the first round, which helped me develop this trust and understanding
Mhm.
that something outside of me loved me, guided me, and brought me
Right.
to where I am.
Yeah.
And then with each round of steps, I met creator a different way. So like first I
Yeah.
met God, then I met source, then I met creator, then I met divine, and then supreme being, the all, the one. Every single time I've done a round of steps, I have been introduced to a new like I've met that energy.
The God of your understanding expands as your
Exactly.
understanding expands.
That's the most beautiful way I've ever heard it put too, because I'm like all the personalities of God, I don't really, but it's because I had a resistance to these words.
Of
I didn't
course.
understand what creator meant. I didn't understand what divine meant. I'd only ever been raised in Catholicism,
Yeah.
and that was, one true God overall.
Right.
And then Hermetics brings me back to there is the God, the Father, yet there's so much more. And that's what
Yeah.
I asked God was, I know like in the commandments it says this, but can you show me? Because I also know that the mythological gods exist because, I just into like just in my body, I knew it. And I hadn't found out about Hermes yet. And but and that's whenever God started showing me like I created mythological gods. I
Yeah.
created this and
Mm.
that. I created you guys as androgynous at first. You know what I mean? Like all
Yes.
of
I want
these
to talk about that if we
sure.
can get to it because I am like I have my whole life, yeah, been like gender's not a thing. And
Well, the biggest I think in society once the hermetic principles come out because the seventh principle is gender, which
right.
technically means generational. It doesn't even
Yeah.
mean
It
like
doesn't
a
it's not male
binary.
female
Exactly.
situation. Yeah.
Exactly. And so what I think everybody's confusing themselves with is the fact that they were never taught that they have
Right.
masculine and feminine in them.
All of
Masculine,
us.
yeah,
Yeah.
men were taught that they cannot behave any type of form of woman, and it doesn't mean I don't mean like whether they dress, what it doesn't matter, but internally the emotions that come with,
They're
oh,
just
you're being a baby,
qualities.
you're being a woman, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that the extreme duality that our social standards have taken us so far away from our like how we were created.
Right.
And when you deny how you're created,
Yeah.
think of
You
all the
cut
times we
yourself
betray
off
ourselves.
from your
Yeah,
creatorness and your creator. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
think of all the times that we betray ourselves, all the
Yep.
times we say yes when we want to say no. All of those things and how sick we get from those mentally and insanity and the patterns that we
Yeah.
create. When we deny that, yes, I have a masculine being inside of me that is half of my body, and I have a feminine being inside of me that is half of my body. And guess what? They want to marry, and sometimes they switch sides. But if you really look at me, you can see that I'm masculine and feminine, but you can't tell which side is which when the job is done.
That's right. It's an integrated whole. It's not
Exactly.
it's
Yes.
it's it's a total integration. Well, I feel like we need to bring this to the Supreme Court that Hermeticism has corrected that the indigenous people have known all along that there is no binary of gender.
Exactly.
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
But I
people
I
they
don't want to
don't
get too
understand.
far. I got excited about that for a moment, but I don't want to
Yeah.
get too far from. So it sounds like your main form of self-inquiry is the 12 steps and your 12-step work.
I I mean, I would have to say it's the way I do alchemy.
Yeah.
And I think that for me, that is the most prominent way to do alchemy, is those because it's literally a treasure map of how to do psychological, spiritual, and mental alchemy, and you
Yeah.
don't even realize it. And I think that one of the reasons I was so able to get into it was number one, psychosis. I
Uh-huh.
literally, when I say psychosis, I don't just mean, oh, this is, I mean, every day for 5 years, I had voices screaming at
Yeah.
me, and so badly that after the first year, because I was still getting high the first year. The second
Mm-hmm.
year, I had 4 suicide attempts. The third
Mm-hmm.
year, I was cutting myself, trying to,
Mm-hmm.
get like, to hold the stuff off.
Right.
And
Yeah.
then the next year after that, all I wanted to do was commit myself. Like,
Mm-hmm.
the universe isolated me, put me in this explosive situation with my twin
Mm-hmm.
flame, and then, everything kind of erupted. And what it basically was whenever I did the shamanic journey, the shaman's first scene of me was me pulling my body through the street with my head split open.
Yeah.
So that the psychosis, and that was symbolizing the psychosis. Like, my
Yep.
higher self came down, split a head, an axe in my head to break me out of Stockholm
Right.
syndrome.
Right. To
And
get
he
you
did
to
the same.
free you
Ex
ultimately.
exactly, and
Yeah.
what it did was it used, this is gonna sound crazy, it used abusive patterning to
Right.
push me into what I wanted.
Right.
So, I heard Rob I heard my abuser's voice all the time,
Yeah.
and I heard his family's voice all the time,
Mm-hmm.
and they would say derogatory, disgusting things, and they would
Mm-hmm.
scream at me all the time,
Mm-hmm.
and in the mornings, it would start real low, and then through the days, it would build up until it got louder and louder and
Mm-hmm.
louder in my head, and then I would finally break down every single day without a
Mm-hmm.
doubt while I was working.
Right.
Eventually, I was like, "Why does this always happen when I'm working?" They said it was because I was in a controlled environment.
That's right, because there was a container. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. I'm glad that you were able to. I think it took me forever to figure it out. Yet,
Yeah.
if I was home and off work, it was easy for me. Even though
Yeah.
I didn't want to drink, I would still reach for a bottle
Of
to
course.
get rid of the like to get rid of the
Yeah.
flashbacks because
Yeah.
the flashbacks were so brutal.
And they
And
knew they would only be able to have your attention if you had the accountability of the work environment.
I did everything I could to get those voices to shut up,
Yeah.
which means for the first 3 years, everything was intensive PTSD therapy,
Yep.
various times. I did art therapy, prolonged exposure, EMDR, what else? I did multiple types of
All the
therapies.
things.
Yeah, I did a women's group every week. I did it 3 times because it was the
Yeah.
only one offered that helped with setting boundaries, and then I went to 3 meetings a week, and I did step work like a boss. Uh,
Yeah.
and the only reason I really did step work like a boss was because that first round at steps made me feel like I could do anything. But I think because I did them so quickly, I ran them
Right.
in such a conjunction that I could feel the alchemy
You could
through.
feel the power. Yeah.
Yeah. And then step 7 was just, the laying it down. I know they call them defects. And I'm okay with that, but I also like to call them imbalances. I feel like
Yeah.
I don't
I've
like
always called
too
them
derogatory.
coping mechanisms because I just know that there was a very beautiful part of how those actually allowed me to survive through
Absolutely.
the process. And that is one of the other main things that I really wanted to ask you about was and it sounds like it came through your 12-step work, but this idea that we're not ultimately alone, that there's a team who is coordinating all of this, even when it looks like it's a higher self cracking you through the skull and dragging you through abuse and the scariest things, which is really sensitive to talk about because for a lot of people, that's really like a not okay area to go to. And I think that both of us would agree that we would like for everyone to be able to choose like a path of kindness and respect, and we're not condoning ever like any form of violence, but there is some sort of piece to the outside like non-physical or spiritual support in the process, that it's like we don't come out of victimhood just because we decide we're ready. There's something else helping us to get there. I know for me, it just felt like a miracle. Like I was just
Yes.
completely on drugs and completely, you know, couldn't put two sentences together. And somehow someone suggested a book that would like help me get off. And then I like got completely off of everything without any medical support in 1 week cold turkey, which is like doctors have told me is not physically possible, you know? So like those feel like that's not just me. Like there's something else that not chose me, because I don't want to put a like some people are chosen, because I know there's so many people who don't ever get out of victimhood in any one lifetime. Maybe it takes them 10,000, you know? But for whatever reason, like there was some sort of timing where I was given the resources to be able to reach for the supports and to be able to have the ability to, like you said, you were given that work container so that you could hear the voices, so that you could face them and not just wash them away. Like, how do you interact with that idea that like it's not just us, that there's this other
The
aspect that gives us the opportunity?
the experience was very traumatizing. Like I'm still processing it. Like and crying about it sometimes, especially since I'm through the voices stir every now and then if I go back to old patternized thinking in my subconscious. Uh I have come to the understanding, the knowing, and the acceptance that, for example, I'll just use myself, of course. I'm an Aries and I am stubborn and I am hellbound and everything else and I needed tough love. Like I had
Mm,
to have tough love. And most people don't want tough love because they think because oh they've been deprived of love, and I was very deprived of love, yet I had to have tough love to for that self responsibility, for that accountability, because otherwise I was me saying, oh, I need to be coddled in my recovery, I need to
mhm.
be loved, I need this nurturing, and I need this team around me, and I have to, it has to be all about me. That is still to me victimhood. i
Yeah,
I would never have gotten clean
people
if people were
tiptoeing
all
around
over
you.
me.
Yeah.
Like I had to have the tough love so I would love myself. So I
Mhm.
would put myself first because I could use everybody else and I would use everybody else. I would have manipulated them. I would
Yep,
have hurt
yep,
them.
yep,
I
yep.
was I was there. And I think a lot of dis-ease creates the illusion that we have to have it this ideal way because that's how the
Yeah,
paradigm's been set up. Everything is supposed to be roses and butterflies. The reality of it
yeah,
is that people are seeing recovery is painful. I know a woman that went a year blind.
yeah,
Like that's a form of psychosis, in my opinion. Some
yeah.
people might not be able to resonate to the same psychosis, but if she wanted to call that psychosis, go for it, girl, because that's crazy to me too.
Yeah, like that idea that the like happy easy path is a better path. I think that's a really interesting duality that we've set up, because I know certainly that in a sense of just looking at storytelling, like none of us enjoy books or movies that are about people who sit on the beach with $1 million sipping, you know, iced tea. We don't watch that for 2 hours on a
Yeah.
movie. We watch something that has a big dramatic arch, and we watch something that has a really heartbreaking ending, you know, and we admire people and talk about people and idealize people who have really rocky stories, right? So there's this storytelling aspect of it that is not conducive with the fantasy of having this like nice easy life where everyone treats us perfectly. And I wonder, like, where historically did we start, like did we always think like, oh, I can say I'm a better person if my life is going smoothly? Like where did we make that link? I know that Christianity does it in a terms of like, you know, God blesses those who
Yeah.
whatever, but I wonder.
I think that it's the never being able to talk about your feelings. The never being able to be honest with one another. There was this fear when people started, whenever it was when people started hurting each other for their own selfish gain, is
Mhm.
whenever there's some type of because telepathy is always rampant, it's always existent. I always say that the internet was created as a depiction of telepathy.
Yeah,
It,
totally.
like, if you can
Memes and like
understand the internet with no
emojis.
firewall,
Yeah, yeah,
that's our mentality. Like, we're
yeah,
all running around,
yeah,
literally hearing each other's thoughts,
yeah,
yet not understanding what is other people's thoughts, what's our own dis-ease or what's our own healthy thoughts or where we are.
yeah.
And to backtrack, I think the question you asked me before, the voices, they they talked to me the whole time I was in abuse, and they would just tell me, hold on, hold on. They would tell me, you're going to get out of this, you're going to get out of this. And then they would tell me when to do things and when not to do things to make sure that I
Uh-huh.
keep myself safe.
Yep.
One of the deals was that I would never have my bones broken. Um,
Uh,
so and then they taught me about process of elimination and trajectory
huh.
paths. So
Uh-huh.
basically, like, I have four choices of what I'm going to do in the next hour.
Okay.
And they literally are doing it by percentage wise. Well,
Huh.
it's 70% chance that she's going to pick this choice. It's, based on our patterning. And so
Huh.
that's where they're coming in. And with this brutal force of things that are getting like stirred up, it's like, we have to keep you on this path. Like, we're in the big leagues. Like, you've heard Jessa say it. Like, this is our last chance to get this. We were
Yeah.
here however long ago and
Yeah,
tried,
we
failed.
have to go with the thing that's gonna work.
And if that means we're getting our asses kicked,
Yeah.
then we're getting our asses kicked. You know what I mean? It's like a football team that gets their asses kicked five
Yeah.
times and then they go to the state
Yeah.
championship because they learned from all their mistakes. They learned from
Yeah.
all the bumps and the bruises. And you're right.
Yeah.
The storylines we know, like Butterfly Effect, that movie will still forever remain with me. Like, the guy
Hmm.
was going crazy, but he could jump in between dimensions or something like that. And it was one of the most beautiful movies I've ever seen.
Yeah, I never saw
And
it.
I know I am my own Bible story. I am my own scripture. I am my own hero. I am my own superhero. I have gotten to witness myself as all of these things because I have eradicated, I can't say eradicated fully because I still kind of go, like, there's still going to be experiences that come up that I need to check myself. Yet I have done a very good job that I am proud of for releasing my victimhood almost instantaneously. Sometimes I need my sponsor or like talking to my stepdaughter to like put me in that frame of mind, yet the willingness to reach out to one of
That's
them,
the thing. It's the willingness.
it is.
Hmm.
And I pray for the willingness. If I feel
Yes.
blocked and I don't understand, I'm like, God, grant me the willingness to even
Yes.
want to do this. Because for a long time, I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to forgive the
That's
person
right.
that did all that stuff to me. I had to beg and pray for the willingness
That's right.
to let myself off that unforgiveness hook and be
E-
able to move forward.
yeah, even the willingness to be willing. And I think
Yes.
that's something that both of us, it sounds like, have been exposed to through 12 steps. But for those people who are not familiar with 12 steps, I think this can be really confusing because praying for willingness is like, so humble. It's so vulnerable. It's such an admitting of I don't know. And that's the piece that connects in with me about the acknowledgement of there's another aspect, there's an outside flow to this river that's not just controlled by me and is not about me only. Like there's a force that is intertwined with everything that I'm doing. And for me to be able to acknowledge that force, I have to surrender that I'm the force, and I have to be willing to let that force be involved. And I feel like when we're more willing to surrender, to be a part of it instead of in charge of it, we don't have to have quite the like slamming wave.
I agree.
Um but like for example, my situation this past week, it was a total knock me over wave, but I finally was able to say today that was the path of least resistance.
Yes.
Even though it was like a big, I mean, it was did not sound like the path of least resistance, but because I had such a resistance to it, it was the what it ended up resulting is I was able to reconnect with and be humble and not in judgment towards a family member who I had been estranged from for like decades. But it had to be this specific situation because that's something that he has an area of expertise in.
Yes.
So me being so humbled in this And him being the only resource I had was the only way that I would have ever considered talking to him again, you know? And
Yeah.
so it's like, oh, you had to orchestrate this, which is a
Yes.
big extreme calamity because that was the only, like, those old fashioned telephone switch lines. That was the only place where it was going to
Yes.
connect.
The only
Dang
plug.
it.
I love it. I love it. And I think one of the biggest things there is like, it sounds like no matter what, you were willing to look at yourself. Like, again, I think it comes back to no matter what happens to me or what experience I'm in, I cannot make it about anybody else. It cannot be about what they did. That's after the fact. I have to look at what I did and how I behaved. And I have to say, was this in line with my spiritual principles? I have to ask
Okay.
myself, was I honest? Was I judgmental? I have to go through that in what we would call a step 10. And I have an app on my phone. It's an easy 10 questions. And, when I'm really
Ooh.
stuck, like I pull it out. But, and as I have like it's become just an alchemical part of my psyche now.
Right,
And
because you've
I can
repeated, repeated,
it's
repeated,
it's the
repeated.
patternization in
Right,
my brain now.
right.
Yes, I have been able to repattern my brain, and I had to
Yeah.
do that physically a lot of
Mm-hmm.
times. This is something that I completely forgot about until now was because of the PTSD and because of the Stockholm syndrome,
Mm-hmm.
I had to learn how to repatternize my brain physically, like in conscious action. So like I
Yes.
was a server and a bartender, and uh, the individual that abused me for so long didn't like tomatoes. So
Uh-huh.
anytime somebody ordered something without tomatoes, bam, I could be in the walk-in cooler
That's right.
in a panic attack.
Yeah.
So I would have to start anybody that ordered tomatoes, I would sit there and think, Tyler, Tyler, Tyler. Tyler's my stepbrother who doesn't like tomatoes. So I was
You were
replacing
making new associations.
exactly. I had to physically every single
Yeah.
day for years
Yeah.
replace what I knew with what I wanted to know. And
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, I will say it doesn't work as good with old information. So like
Mm-hmm.
knowing that my brother or my stepbrother was, Tyler and that he didn't like tomatoes, that's old information.
Yeah.
Eventually somebody came
Finding
into my life.
confirmation in the present is
Yes. And
way
so
more
somebody came into
powerful.
my life, my stepdaughter's boyfriend in high school, not a real important person, but
That's
or and
present day.
she yeah, present day, and she was important to me. There was that connection, there was that
Right.
fire,
There was
and
a link.
he didn't like tomatoes. So guess
There you
what?
go.
Dylan doesn't like tomatoes, and that trumps the abuser that
Yes.
doesn't like
Yes,
tomatoes
yes,
because
yes.
it's a new story. It didn't
New
happen.
story.
Exactly. New stories and changing the story before. That's
Yep.
the other way. Is just, and not only that, I didn't even always change the story. The changes in me changed the
Change the
story.
story.
Like God, source, whatever, started changing the story for me and started revealing things to me. Like how when the light switch turned off when my dad died, I didn't have a choice. It was what
Yeah.
I planned. And I chose this life. I remember being in the shower like 2 months ago and all of a sudden seeing that I picked every event that I've been through, and that means the
Yeah.
worst of them. And
Dang
then it
it.
also, but
I know. I
I
know.
shouldn't say, but I should say, and because I understand it. I know what's karma now.
Yeah.
I know that what happened to me when I was
Yeah.
18 is a karmic lineage. I know
Yeah.
that, and I found that out later on when I found articles of my uncles who were on trial for murder and
Right.
heinous crimes.
Right.
And so it's like, and I also know because if it happens twice, it's not karma. If it happens 3 times in my life, it's karma. And when I say 3 times, I mean there's three very certain circumstances. And in ninth grade, a nasty rumor, because I would switch schools and was new, a nasty rumor was spread about me being raped by a handicapped person that I had no idea. You know what I mean? And so that touched my life in ninth grade. It touched my life when I was 18. And then it touched my life whenever I found the newspaper articles
Yeah.
and really unfolded for me this family that I idolized and
Mm-hmm.
thought were wonderful, and then found, realized like, yeah, I was an asshole and they were assholes. How dare, what is
And
wrong with me?
everybody plays that role at
Yeah.
some point.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't, it was hard. It was a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier with acceptance. There's still some feeling to feel through with that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The acceptance is integrating for sure. And it's also, I think what did it was that day I get a lot of the good stuff in the shower with the water. I think we all do. It
Yeah.
was the realize like the showing of like me picking everything and me
Yeah.
agreeing to do all of this because until that moment happened, it was kind of like, I understand the concept of generational karma. I understand that kind of stuff, but I don't really want that to be my story. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So what I don't want to be my story, I still have to look at it as, if this is true, I can handle it. I can be okay with it.
Right.
Again, I've got that willingness that I want to know the truth. I want to know the
Yeah.
universal truth. I don't want to know the 3D or the 4D or the
Yeah.
5D truth. I want to know 12D. I want to know 13. I want to know
Yeah.
why I'm here and what this light is doing on this plane. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that that's what we kind of tend to forget is like I said, we get one shot at this ascension. Like, we don't get another one for Earth. Like, we get this one shot, and people are here for dirty jobs. They are here for dirty
Mm.
jobs on both sides of the fence. Can you imagine what it's going to be like when most of these gentlemen wake up and they realize that their too drunk partner, when they knew that she was too drunk,
Mm-hmm.
how they're going to react to that kind of stuff? Like, there's going to
Mm-hmm.
be shit hitting the fan on both sides when people start to awaken.
Yeah. Yeah. And hopefully, when we are able to have that perspective of like, okay, this was how we needed to learn about this. How can you learn about the concept of unconditional love when you don't have conditions? We need the conditions in order to prove that unconditional love is possible. We
Yeah.
need judgment in order to prove that there's absolute innocence, right? Because if you don't contest it, then how can you accept it? But wow, oh my goodness. Well, I have just been like filling out pages and pages of notes. I was not wrong when I knew that this was going to be such a powerful conversation, and I'm so grateful for all that you shared. I would love to do this again sometime because I think we barely scratched the surface. Um, I really especially loved how you named a little bit ago that self responsibility and that like allowing yourself to consider all the perspectives and having people around you who share those first two principles so that when you go to them and you're not quite ready and you're not quite having the willingness that they can remind you that you've committed to that. So it's so powerful. And I just so appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And I will say, I mean, just as well as I do, when you go on this journey and you start asking for the willingness and you start asking for the direction in a humble manner, that it is given to you in the softest way possible. My sponsor,
Mm-hmm.
all these people, they're not brutal with me like the psychosis was. They are compassionate and loving and kind. And they will tell me,
Mm-hmm.
she's just like, my sponsor will be like, you're just in self right now. Like, you're in
Mm-hmm.
self-centered fear. And I think that that is the biggest trigger point for victimhood, is self-centered fear.
Yeah. Yep.
So I am very blessed to have been on here with you today. This was a riveting conversation. You actually, I didn't know what to expect, and you helped me pivot a lot. I haven't been on a podcast in quite some time, and I've reframed, again, changed my entire narrative, reframed a lot of things from focusing on the trauma of the psychosis and what happened with my twin flame to now being able to open up about the things that I've really learned and the things that
Mm.
have really guided me through this, and so I'm very honored for this. I really appreciate
Aw.
the opportunity to see just how much I have adjusted to
Yes.
who I am becoming in a more mature, kinder, humble way.
Aw, I'm so grateful to be a part of you being able to witness that progress within yourself. How
Yeah.
wonderful. And so, will you talk a little bit about what you offer and where people can find you?
Absolutely. Thank you. Yes. Hermeticallyspeaking.com, or I'm on Instagram and Facebook as Hermetically Speaking, yet I don't do a whole lot. And I offer a Herkimer Diamond reading, which is where it's a channeled tarot reading where you basically walk through the Celtic cross spread with me, and we look at all your blocks, and you working with me activates yourself into your own prophecy. Things start to get revealed, and anything that's in a reverse card, we flip it right back up at the time being. We can find the resolution in that moment and the direction that you need to go. So there's no questions or doubts or what do I need to do here? It's, hey, this is a reverse card. And if it's one that you're not happy with, it's like, well, what do we need to do to fix it? And we turn it upside. I
Very
do
cool.
gene key readings, which is prophetic
Ah,
gene keys on the different like the Venus sequence, things like
yeah.
that. I do different styles of past life regressions. I do a written prophecy, which is where you get a book that is the writing of your prophecy that's channeled through me.
Wow.
And I think I'm sure there's probably maybe one or two other ones that I'm not quite remembering right off the bat, but
And
those
many
are, and
magical things to come.
I don't even know what I'm thinking. Like I do Akashic record reading. Like
Oh,
that's yeah. I do Akashic record reading. So those are the main things. The written prophecy is the newest one, and it comes out in scripture. So it's super interesting and it touches on all different types of subjects. It's kind of like, I actually have it made into a book and mailed to you.
wow. That's so
Uh
cool.
and thank you. And everything is, and because I just love to write, so I'm practicing. And so everything is by donation basis, and there are suggested donations on my website for every single item. Yet I also know that everybody's in different situations, and I know
Yeah.
I've been through financial lack myself, and I'm coming out on the other end of that, and so I do always warrant that no one be afraid to book even with minimal. I'm very happy for pay it forward for the time being. I can't say that's going to be forever. Yet at this point in time, I feel like if you find me, then it should be possible.
Amazing. Amazing. All right. Well, I'll put all that information in the description and thank you again. And I look forward to more to come.
Absolutely.
Beautiful. Beautiful. All right.